Unless this is your very first fantasy football video ever, and if that's the case, welcome, you've come to the right place. You know the value of a first-round running back that actually meets their lofty expectations. I mean, we draft them among the top picks for a reason, right? And then if we pair that with yet another top back, we can start separating ourselves from the pack in our leagues fairly quickly. And over the last few seasons, we've seen some of the sharpest minds in season-long fantasy football employ a strategy where they take one or two of those league-changing backs and then quickly pivot to all the other positions before moving back to the running back position much later in drafts. Thus, the hero RB strategy or anchor RB strategy was born. And its even more profitable younger brother, affectionately known as Double Hero RB. Double Hero RB won people a ton of money in Underdog Fantasy contests last year. And honestly, guys, it's probably going to again. But that's not what this video is about, because naturally, I'm not the first to discover these trends. You can find plenty of videos breaking down how to execute those strategies all over YouTube, including here on the Stokastic Fantasy Football channel. But I started thinking, what if we push it even further? Have people explored this at all? Because we've got Hero RB, Double Hero RB. What if we went
Triple Hero RB?
Whoa, slow down, Tiger. If we're going to employ a strategy like that, we're going to make some important and deliberate decisions, especially from round 4 on. I warn you, this strategy is not for the faint of heart, but oh man, can it create a juggernaut. This is the Hyperfragile Draft Strategy. What's up, everyone? My name is Matt Savoca from the Stokastic Fantasy Football channel, and today I'm going to be pushing the limits of the most profitable fantasy football strategy. I'm going to be breaking down all the nuances here, what Hyperfragile is, when to use it, why it works, and how to execute the strategy in 2022 fantasy drafts. And stick around for a special offer I've got from Stokastic and our friends at Underdog Fantasy. Let's get into it. Hyperfragile was always a fantasy draft strategy, especially in the ages of the bell cow running back, the early aughts, if you will. But it wasn't strictly defined until the mid-2010s when analysts at RotoViz started looking at the roster constructions of consistently winning fantasy football players. They noticed many juggernaut teams, the teams that take home massive prizes in large tournaments especially, were getting a huge majority of their running back production from just a few superstar players. These teams were typically able to cobble together 2 or even 3 of the year's league-changing backs, which meant when you looked at their RB4 and below on their team, it almost didn't matter who they drafted. The workhorses did a vast majority of the scoring, and some had chosen to forego drafting anyone beyond their 4th running back. That's the crux of the Hyperfragile Draft Strategy. We're aiming to find at least 3 legendary running backs that are averaging over 20 Underdog Fantasy points per game. And we're aiming to find them typically within the first 4 rounds. After those running backs, we'll tap the position literally one more time before the end of the draft. And even then, we're gonna go back to the running back position a little bit earlier than you think we should. It might make you a little uncomfortable, but a perfect execution of the Hyperfragile Draft Strategy also includes 1 running back from the premium RB3 tier. We'll get into what that means in a minute. And from there, outside the running back position, it's just about understanding your league, the trends of the draft, and getting all the other starter positions. And with running back accounted for, there's this strange freedom you'll feel in the middle rounds. You won't be fighting over the RB4 and RB5 scraps like the rest of your league mates are. That's another hidden upside in the Hyperfragile Draft Strategy. Let's talk about when to use Hyperfragile. From a micro trend standpoint, you of course need to read your draft room. Hear me loud and clear. Never force a draft strategy upon your draft before you go into the room. But from a macro trend perspective, 2022 is an excellent year to employ the Hyperfragile Draft Strategy because of the way that the ADP has shaken up between running backs and wide receivers in the top 4 rounds. I mean, just littered throughout the first 4 rounds of fantasy drafts. We have running backs who, if everything breaks right for them, they could easily be the RB1 overall in fantasy. And the continued influx of 0 RB drafters, nay, zealots, means there are going to be plenty of people in your draft room zigging while you attempt to zag. This strategy also works particularly well in leagues that feature top-heavy prize pools, where first place gets pretty much all the glory. Believe it or not, in leagues like that, the Hyperfragile strategy is even more advantageous. I mean, let's be real, we're not aiming for 4th place in our leagues anyway. The Hyperfragile strategy embraces that mentality and aims to create a monster of a team, one that makes your league mates cower in fear at the thought of facing in the playoffs. But before we talk about how to execute the Hyperfragile strategy, shouldn't we ask, is this worth it? Why are we even doing this? Well, first of all, it's won people literally millions of dollars. The original Best Ball Mania tournament winner on Underdog Fantasy employed this exact strategy. And for teams that utilize the Hyperfragile strategy, their advance rate, their ability to make the playoffs in these large tournaments, continues to outpace expectations. And while injuries play a key role in deciding which exact strategy is the most profitable from year to year, this strategy consistently and counterintuitively outpaces robust RB in terms of playoff rate, semifinal rate, and finals rate year over year. So if you like making the playoffs or finally getting further than that in your league, I think Hyperfragile is absolutely worth adding to your arsenal of draft day strategies. Let's dig into how to pull it off in 2022. Hey guys, if you haven't checked out Underdog Fantasy yet, you are missing out. The best place to play best ball fantasy football is on Underdog Fantasy, and we've got a special offer for you right now. If you use promo code Stokastic, Stokastic, you will get a first match deposit bonus up to $100, and the gifts don't stop there. Over at Stokastic, we'll kick in our best ball draft kit and our fantasy draft kit as well. Access to all our rankings, tournament rankings, cash game rankings, and of course, getting you ready for your league's draft as well. Easy as that. Just use promo code Stokastic and make a deposit as well. We got a link in the video description below if you're watching on YouTube. That's Stokastic. Here's how I'm going about a Hyperfragile strategy build in 2022. In round 1, there are 5 running backs who all look like strong candidates to have legendary seasons from a fantasy perspective. Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry, and Dalvin Cook. You could even throw Najee Harris in there. All look like they could have absolutely monster seasons at the running back position. Getting at least one of these top players is a prerequisite for this strategy, at least for me this year. In round 2, double up that pick with another high upside running back pick, like Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, DeAndre Swift, or Javonte Williams. Some of them, like Barkley and Kamara, have a guaranteed touch floor but need help getting to their ceiling that they once saw in previous years. Others like Jones, Swift, and Williams are expected to be the more efficient of a backfield by committee. All of them, once again, have RB1 overall potential. Then in round 3, check for any running back value that may have fallen. Maybe we've got Leonard Fournette or Nick Chubb, but interestingly enough, this may be a moment where you go wide receiver and then finish out the running back position over the next 2 rounds. From there, my top candidates to have legendary running back seasons include Travis Etienne, Elijah Mitchell, Cam Akers, you heard me, and of course, Breece Hall. Check out the video where we talk about how good Breece Hall could be in year 1. And then finally, we finish with a running back from the premium RB3 tier. A player with guaranteed opportunity from the start, but if one thing breaks right, they could be a weekly top 5 back. This year, my favorites from that list include A.J. Dillon, Tony Pollard, Kareem Hunt, Rashad Penny, Devin Singletary, and even Miles Sanders. And after those 4, you're done at running back. You're now going to be behind your league mates at the wide receiver position, and so we're going to be employing the quantity over quality approach. When drafting wide receivers after employing a Hyperfragile strategy, it's important to mix up the types of wideouts you draft. You'll want players with strong weekly floors in the mid-rounds. Players like Brandon Cooks, Adam Thielen, Hunter Renfrow, boring wide receivers who don't get your league mates as hyped. These types of players can be your friend when employing the Hyperfragile strategy. And then, after getting 3 to 4 wide receivers that fit that high floor mold, go for hyper-athletic young players who are getting overlooked because of their situation. Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and Jahan Dotson are essentially free in fantasy drafts and all have top 16 NFL draft capital. And Jamison Williams, who might have gone before all of them in the NFL draft if he were healthy, is a sneaky good stash on your IR slot. Then with quarterback and tight end, these are read the room situations. Every draft in every league is different, but an elite player at least one of those positions can actually be helpful to a Hyperfragile build. By taking top options at those onesie positions and then not focusing too much on the backups, we free up precious roster space for that quantity over quality approach at the wide receiver position. And then I'll add one final twist, one caveat for the home league players who are employing Hyperfragile. Unlike how I would suggest playing this in best ball tournaments, depending on the size of your bench, I think a 5th running back or a 6th running back taken at the very end of your draft is absolutely fine. Having the availability of the waiver wire and knowing that most late round picks are going to end up there anyway means that it's not disadvantageous to take those extra running backs like it is in best ball tournaments. Or put another way, once you get to the final 3 rounds of your fantasy draft, just do whatever you want. Have some fun. And that's it, guys. Everything you need to know about the Hyperfragile draft strategy and how to execute it in 2022. We got everything you need over at the Stokastic Fantasy Football channel to get you ready for your drafts this season. We got breakout players, must draft players, how to draft from every single draft position, truly so much for you. And make sure to check out our offer from Underdog Fantasy as well. Until next time, I'm Matt Savoca. We'll see you guys later.